What's up, big baller shot callers? Big Ken here. Welcome from the Grits Room Sports Talk Show. Got a good show in store for you tonight. Unfortunately, my best friend Monty Brown, we had a little bit mix up of time, so he's not able to get on the show tonight. But we will be back this Friday though for the recap of the Cowboys Eagles game that's being played on Thursday night, the first NFL game of the season, Week One. But tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about college football. Week one was pretty impressive. Already a couple big upsets. The big one is Florida State, who had a horrible year last year. Being ranked number 10 preseason polls, they're off like 0-4 last year. They knocked off number 8 Alabama week one. Um, so talk about that a little bit. Poor old Kellen DeBoer, taking over for a legendary coach like Nick Saban. He's having a tough go. I think he's a great coach, but it just sucks. He's the first coach to come in after Nick Saban and everything he did at Alabama and college football in general, but especially Alabama. Um, the number 6 matchup, number 10 Miami versus number 6 Notre Dame was a very good game. Miami won 27-24, so that game was as good as advertised. This goes back, to the '80s rivalry with guys like Michael Irvin and the whole Netflix documentary or 30 for 30 documentary. Catholics versus convicts. Notre Dame, Miami goes all the way back to '80s. That seemed like a good game yesterday to kind of like recapture that old '80s, '90s kind of rivalry they had going on back in the day when both teams were really good. Um, Other big games going on, Texas, number one Texas versus Ohio State, obviously, that was a good game. But I'm getting too much of college football right now. We are going to talk more about college football, but I also want to talk about some of the things we're going to talk about in the show tonight. We're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys Netflix series, America's Team, and just talk about the Micah Parsons trade to Green Bay. What's your thoughts on that? And like I said, I was getting a little bit taken away with college football in the beginning. Start talking about some games a little bit too much before I got into the rest of what we're going to talk about in the show. But I think I was talking about, you know, uh, I was about to talk about Ohio State versus Texas. Number one, Texas versus number three, Ohio State. The game was played at Ohio State. We know Ohio State is the defending national champions from last year. Texas is number one. The biggest thing about Texas, obviously, is their quarterback Archie Manning. Obviously Manning, right? The last name Manning. A lot of hype and a lot of pressure comes with having that name on the back of your jersey. Um, I didn't see the game live personally, but his overall stats didn't look bad. Throwing for 170 yards, having a touchdown, having an interception. But I heard he had way less than 100 yards going into the fourth quarter, and he threw for over 100 yards in the fourth. So like over 100 yards of his 170 came in the fourth quarter. The game was close throughout. It was very low scoring. Ohio State won 14-7. So obviously Texas's defense is legit. They were really good last year. I mean, their front seven was really good last year. Their secondary was what their weakness was last year. But overall, Texas defense looks really good. Ohio State's defense looks really good again. Defensive battle. Um, a lot of people talking trash about Archie Manning, but here's my thing. Obviously, a lot of people are going to think he's self entitled, this, that, and the other, because he has the name Manning on the back of his jersey, like I said, and that may be true. I never met him personally. I don't know what his attitude is like. I don't know if he's this arrogant kid or not. But here's my thing. It was only week one, and he's playing against a no bullshit number three Ohio State team coming off a national championship, and he got limited experience last year in his freshman year. So I wouldn't say he's overrated in week one. I know a lot of people are already saying that, all the haters out there. Um, but I'm saying it's way too early to say this about a kid when it's his first really big road start. Like say he started a couple games last year, but he wasn't playing against no freaking Ohio State. I'll tell you that much. At Ohio State. So I think he's fine personally. We'll see as the season progresses, but I think like any other young quarterback, any other young player in general, he's just gonna have his ups and downs in his first full year starting, especially at the quarterback position. But I think overall he's gonna be okay, and I think Texas will be okay. By no means is Texas out of the playoff race, especially with the 12 team format that started last year. I mean, even under the 4 team format, you can if you lose, it's better to lose the first game of the year in the old 4 team format and then win out the rest of the season and still having a good chance of making it into the college football playoffs. But since it's a 12 team system now, I mean, as long as if Texas goes 10-2, their chances playing in the SEC are very high to get in. I mean, nothing's guaranteed, but I would say like it's over 90% if Texas goes 10-2 playing in a Power Four conference like the SEC, they will be in at 10-2, and they may win out and finish 11-1, 12-1 if they win the SEC, conference championship. So I wouldn't count Texas out. Obviously, they play in a tough division, SEC, but they're really good, and I think Archie Manning will get better as the season goes along. And we already know their defense is pretty good, so it's just Archie Manning and the offense figuring things out pretty much. Um, Another big upset. I won't say it's an upset. It wasn't a big upset, but man, week one did not disappoint. Like 3 top 10 matchups. I mean, number 9 LSU beat number 4 Clemson in Death Valley. A road game for Clemson. They won. I mean, a road game for LSU. Excuse me. They won 17-10. Another defensive battle. I know LSU didn't look very good in the first half, but they made a halftime adjustments, and they played a lot better in the second half. So, you know, I was watching the SEC Netflix show Any Given Saturday in SEC, and that was pretty good. LSU was a team they talked about a lot in that show, and we know their quarterback came back in the SEC show. Any given Saturday in the SEC, the LSU quarterback was thinking about declaring for the NFL draft, but he decided, to come back this year and play for LSU, and it definitely shows. It definitely helps because he's got a ton of experience, and it definitely showed. In week one, his leadership and his experience definitely helped him lead to a victory. And LSU's defense is a lot better too. The last couple of years, LSU's defense has been horrible, but LSU looked really good on defense last night. So if LSU's defense is greatly improved from the past 2 or 3 seasons where they've been getting torch playing like in these crazy shootouts, if their defense is better than LSU, who's got it, LSU is going to give the SEC a run for their money this year if things continue to play out the way it looked like in week one. But anything can happen. But right now, um, yeah, I like LSU's chances with a quarterback returning in their defense getting a lot better. Like LSU could be really strong this year. Um, the big upset was Florida State over Alabama, like I mentioned um, in the opening. So here's my question to the viewers: what do you guys think about Kellen DeBoer? Like I said in the opening, I kind of feel sorry for him that he's taking over for a guy like Nick Saban. But do you think he'll survive in Alabama? Only in his defense, this is only year two, and if he gets fired to year two, I think that'd be pretty freaking crazy. Um, but obviously, Alabama is used to winning national championships, so I guess for me, this depends on how they play the rest of the season. Right? It's only week one, but I'm sure there's already a lot of haters out there because they lost. You know, they finished 9-4 last season. They lost to Michigan, my team, Michigan, in the bowl game. They had 3 losses in the regular season. I think they're 9-3, and that's not like Alabama. But even under the great Nick Saban, there was a couple of the years where he did have a couple of 3 loss teams, and they weren't in the college football playoffs, or they had a 2 loss team under the old like I said under the old college football format. The top 4 teams get in. If you had 2 losses, you're out. And Saban had a couple of 2 loss teams, maybe a couple of 3 loss teams, and there's a couple of years where they was playing in regular bowl games, but it didn't happen to Nick Saban very often. But happened to Kellen DeBoer in his first year, and he's lost in week one. I'm sure some of the UW fans are happy because he had one really good year here at UW. I'm sorry, and he opted out of his contract after just one season. at University of Washington, UW, and he goes to Alabama. But I mean, Alabama is a premier coaching job, so it just depends on which way you kind of look at that. Did he sell out on UW? Should have he finished his contract? Should people finish their contracts and not leave early? That's another thing. Can universities make him stay? Obviously, he wouldn't be very happy though. So even if they made him stay, like how good is he going to do? But then again, it all comes down to being professional, right? Professionalism, like whether you get forced to stay, you still got to do the best you freaking can, right? I mean, you're an adult and you're leading young men, so you would like to think that coaches would be the bigger person and still do that, but you never know in today's world. So it's probably, I guess what I'm saying, it's probably better Kellen DeBoer is at Alabama, I guess. But as a full grown man, as an adult, you need to handle your business whether you want to be there or not. Is what I'm saying, and finish out your contract. I couldn't get out of the Navy early, you know. During my 26 years, if you're unhappy, you still got to do the best you can and finish it, and then get out, and not reenlist, right? So anyways, I look at things in a different lens, I guess you could say. But that's really it about college football. Um, there's only one top 25 matchup in week 2, and that's my Michigan Wolverines, number 14 versus number 18, Oklahoma. Both teams 1-0 when their season openers against some easier competition. I know Michigan beat New Mexico 34-17. I can't remember who Oklahoma beat, but they won pretty handily, 35-7, against a low, weaker opponent. They're just getting TV time playing against a major D1 team, getting money for the university kind of deal. But this game is in Oklahoma, so Michigan definitely has a road challenge early. I kind of like that because usually Michigan plays cupcakes their first 3 weeks of the season before they get into Big Ten play in week 4. So I am kind of glad that Michigan is playing a solid, top 25 team at their home away, in Oklahoma. So that's going to be a good test for Michigan. We have a new quarterback at Michigan. He looked good in week 1, but obviously the competition is going to rise this upcoming week playing against Oklahoma. And it's a road game, which we don't know how good. That's always a hard experience for young quarterbacks to play on the road. Archie Manning obviously figured that out in week 1, but they're not. But Oklahoma's good, but they're not a top 5 team and a defending national championship team. But they are a top 25 team though. But anyways, get what I'm saying. Um, let's let's get into the Netflix show. So Dallas Cowboys came out with a new Netflix series. It got released about 2 weeks ago, maybe um, middle of August. I think August 19th was the debut day. Um, so it's called America's Team. Obviously, I know a lot of people hate that the Dallas Cowboys are called America's Team. The Cowboys fans themselves did not come up with this. I believe this is from journalists and other people, but it's not from the fans. But a lot of people seem to think it's the fans. But I think that one of the journalists called it America's Team back in the '70s with the great Tom Landry when the Cowboys had their early heyday in the '70s with Tom Landry. That's when it got called America's Team. Um, but a lot of people don't like that because, for example, in the series about to talk about, that just aired 2 weeks ago, when they played the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Super Bowl in the early '90s, when the Cowboys were in their second heyday in the '90s, from the '70s, you know, the Pittsburgh Steelers coach was like, "Aren't we America's team? Because like we have steel workers working in Pittsburgh and we're hard nosed blue collar workers. That's America's team. Cowboys are kind of like they're the pretty boys. It's kind of like I look at it from the NBA perspective, like the LA Lakers and the Showtime. It's kind of like the Cowboys, kind of like Showtime, the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders and all the events they got going on, especially what Jerry Jones has created in Jerry's world. It kind of seems like that. So I get what Pittsburgh Steelers head coach is talking about. But anyways, going down a rabbit hole. But there was a lot of interesting things that happened that were discussed in this Dallas Cowboys show called America's Team. I mean, it talks about Tom Landry being Tom Landry having the team in the '70s up until when Jerry Jones buys the team in 19 I think 88. It was late 80s. It was either 88 or 89. I believe it was 88 because Aikman came in 89 and Irvin got there in 87 with Mike Irvin played his rookie year with the great Tom Landry. I think his second year is when Jerry Jones came in, and of course Jerry Jones fires Tom Landry, which a lot of old Dallas Cowboys fans are not happy about. I mean, Tom Landry was an absolute freaking legend in the Cowboys. At the Cowboys, and he's bringing his buddy, his college buddy from the University of Arkansas, them playing college football in the early '60s, you know, to be the head coach of the Cowboys. So Dallas Cowboys fans just did not know what to expect about that. So that the show covers that. Going from the '70s to transition to the late '80s when Cowboys were struggling, being 1-15 in Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson's first year there. Then 3 years later, 3 or 4 years later, they win their first Super Bowl, and then they have the back-to-backs. Then they lose the NFC Championship game to 49ers the year after. Then they win again with a new head coach, Barry Switzer, taking over for Jimmy Johnson. It talks about the Jimmy Johnson saga, Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones saga with the coaching. So I'm gonna talk about all that stuff. I talk about the players, Michael Irvin getting his cocaine trouble, Troy Aikman having issues with new coach Barry Switzer, and I think Troy Aikman was kind of wrong for his attitude personally, but I'll get into that. And I think that the old Dallas Cowboy that caused the least amount of trouble out of the trio, the big three, was Emmitt Smith. You didn't hear a peep out of him. He was just supportive the whole time. Aikman has issues with Barry Switzer. Michael Irvin had his issues with doing drugs and screwing hookers and having orgies at what they called the White House, like a house that the Dallas Cowboys players bought. I think they pitched in to buy this house, and it was kind of like a sex house, really close to their practice facility. I mean, this show covers all that. It was a really good show. It was 8 episodes long, and it talked from A to Z, man. Um, but from the beginning, like I said, I already kind of mentioned this, kind of like paraphrasing real quickly. But yeah, Jerry Jones buys a team in '88, and of course he's an oil man in Texas, and he did play college football, but he has no NFL experience. But it was his dream to own an NFL team. Obviously, this dude's filthy rich, and he struck it big in the oil business, obviously, and he's able to buy the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys were going in the wrong direction at that time frame, so it made it a little bit easier for him to buy the team. And like I said also earlier, like he gets rid of Tom Landry. He's a great coach. He kind of knew as good of a head coach Tom Landry was, and everything he'd done for the Cowboys, winning a couple of Super Bowls with the Cowboys back in the '70s. He's just like he's getting older. He's kind of losing his touch a little bit. Like I'm gonna switch things up, and I'm hiring my buddy. I'm hiring my ex teammate. Jimmy Johnson. Us playing college football together, and they won a national championship together at University of Arkansas. I'm hiring my buddy to take over this team because he knew what Jimmy Johnson was doing at the University of Miami. He had just won a national championship at Miami. Michael Irvin was one of his former players there, you know, and he knew that Jimmy Johnson just had a winning attitude. Like he was committed to excellence, just committed to winning, and he believed that's what the Cowboys needed. And that was one of the good things Jerry Jones did. He's done a lot of bad things, but one of the good things I say Jerry Jones did, and I'll give him credit, was he took a chance in hiring Jimmy Johnson. Like I said, a lot of Cowboys faithful were actually pissed off about it. They couldn't believe their boy, the legend Tom Landry, was gone. But he did have a couple back-to-back losing seasons, and like I said, it looked like he was just kind of losing his touch. But he was still a legend because he's won a couple Super Bowls, and he was a very smart guy and just a very stoic figure, and he had the famous hat, and just a class act kind of guy, right? So a lot of people didn't like that, but Jerry Jones seemed to know what he was doing. It didn't look like it in the beginning. Like I said, they started off 1-15 the first year. They're calling for Jerry Jones's head. I mean, Cowboys Nation is pissed off. I think the second year they finished 7-9. The second year Troikman was a rookie. Urban was like, I think Mike Urban was like in his second or third year, and yeah, Urban was in his third year because he was there 2 years before Aikman. 1 year with Landry, 1 year with Jimmy Johnson before Troikman. So Michael Urban's going to his third year. Troikman is a rookie. They finished 7-9, so they definitely improved, but they still had a losing record. But 115 to 7-9, I believe that's pretty big improvement. Year three, year three of the Jimmy Johnson, Jerry Jones era. Troikman's second year there, they get a rookie running back, Emmitt Smith, University of Florida, pays huge dividends. You know, they get to the playoffs. Um, I believe they won their first playoff game, but they lost their second. I think they finished the season like 11-5 that year, so they improved again, but they lost somewhere in the playoffs. They weren't quite in the NFC Championship game, but I do believe they won the first round wild card game. If I remember correctly, I believe they lost it in the divisional round. Um, Next year, which I believe is a season, I believe which is the 1992 season, but they win the Super Bowl in '93. They go all the way to the Super Bowl, win it. You know, they I know they won. I know they beat Buffalo in back-to-back years. I can't. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Buffalo. The last year was against Pittsburgh, so they beat Buffalo. They blow them out. I mean, it's whoop the crap out of them. We know how famous. You know, how famous Buffalo is for going to Super Bowl 4 years in a row, losing all four. Um, yeah, so they get blown out in that game. You know, everyone is freaking stoked, man. Cowboys Nation is happy. Jimmy Jones, I keep on saying Jimmy Jones, Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones relationship is still intact. But the next season, coming into the 93-94 season, you could tell like first half of the season they're okay, but tension started building the last half of the year with Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones, especially right before getting into the playoffs. That's what a lot of people are saying. The Cowboys are doing great, and they have this great winning record. They're the defending, Super Bowl champions. They're like, but they're going into the playoffs the wrong way because they could tell there's some feuding going on with Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson. You know, and this is why my questions to all viewers, especially Cowboys viewers, a bunch of mixed reactions. Do we think Jerry Jones was wrong for being too invested into the team? Because the reason why Jimmy Johnson's getting pissed is because Jimmy Johnson's like, dude, I'm a football guy. You're an oil businessman. I've been coaching football for 30 years. You've been around football. Yes, we played college football together, but since then, you had nothing to do with football until the last 4 or 5 years. Like, I've been coaching for 30 years. Since we left college, I've been a football coach. You've been in the oil business. Congratulations to you. You're rich. You bought the team. You're my owner. That's cool, but I'm the coach. That's what he was saying. You got your millions. You sit in the press box. You do your thing. You can do all the publicity you want. That's what Jerry Jones liked. Like I said, he was about Showtime, like Los Angeles Lakers, like I said before. You know, Jimmy Johnson wanted him to stay out of the way. Jerry Jones's ego, in my opinion, couldn't handle that. It was all about, they both had egos. Like, Jimmy Johnson is far from innocent. He is. But in my opinion, out of the two, I think Jerry Jones is the bigger one to blame. Like I said, my mom says it takes two people to tango, it takes two to tango. So I don't think it's all, Jerry Jones' fault. Jimmy Johnson could have been better about some things. Also, in hindsight 2020, they both could have been. And they talk about later on at the very end of the show, when Jimmy Johnson gets inducted to the College Football Ring of Honor, Hall of Fame, so to speak. They kind of like heal the relationship 30 years later. But at that time frame, you know, they just weren't having it. They both had strong opinions, strong attitudes, and they didn't want to budge. But even though Jimmy Johnson isn't innocent, I think, like I said, I think Jimmy Johnson had every right to feel the way he did. Jerry Jones, should have stepped out of the way. Like, Jimmy Johnson's your coach. You brought him here for a reason. He's already got you one ring. Just let him do his thing. Um, and despite all their animosity and all this drama with them, Cowboys win back-to-back Super Bowls. They play Buffalo again in back-to-back Super Bowls. Everyone's pissed off. They didn't want to see the exact same Super Bowl twice, but Buffalo's like, screw you guys. We made it here fair and square. They actually play much better. They're actually up 13-6 at halftime. But second half, Cowboys just give the ball nothing to Emmitt Smith. The very first drive of the second half, they give it to him every single play of the second half, and they score a touchdown in the opening drive of the third quarter. Cowboys never look back. It goes from 13-6, and Cowboys win the Super Bowl 30-13. Buffalo didn't get blown out quite as bad as they did the year previously, but Cowboys absolutely dominated second half with Emmitt Smith. Here's the thing. All Cowboys fans remember this because we won a Super Bowl. We won one Super Bowl afterwards. I'm sorry, but here's the thing. First, this makes NFL headlines. Jimmy Johnson has won two back-to-back Super Bowls, and he's being let go as the Cowboys football head coach. This has never happened in sports history, any sport, I don't think, when your coaches just won you two championships. You got the trophy 2 years in a row, and you're letting go of the coach. That has shown a lot about that is not a good look on Jerry Jones, in my opinion. Like, dude, this is all your ego. And he said something crazy, like, and it talks about in the show, like, I could hire 500 coaches and they can win me Super Bowl with this kind of team. They were mega talented. There's no doubt about that. But that was a pretty low blow. I mean, anyone would take that pretty personal. Obviously, Jimmy Johnson took that very personal. I think any of us would as human beings. Yes, you have a mega talented team, but you have to control a mega talented team. You have to control the attitudes of all these superstar players. You have to call the right plays at the right times. You got to know all their quirks. You got to know, like, what makes them happy, what makes them pissed off. Chemistry, right? Team balance. So yes, a lot of people can win. I mean, a lot of people would have winning records, but wins. I mean, I think there's no doubt they would have a winning record that team. But winning a Super Bowl is a totally different thing than having a win record going into playoffs. So yeah, Jimmy Johnson's gone. He hires Barry Switzer. Barry Switzer has a completely different approach because Jimmy Johnson was kind of an asshole his first couple of years, and a lot of Cowboys players absolutely could not stand him early on his first couple of years, probably especially when they were like freaking losing. But then when they started winning, they started realizing why Jimmy Johnson was being as hard as him as he was, because he was demanding perfection. He was demanding excellence. He doesn't like losing. He demanded you play at your best all times. He was very in your face head coach, kind of like a high school coach. He had a very high school coach kind of mentality in the NFL, which now all coaches are like that. Barry Switzer was the exact opposite. He's a good coach in his own right. And Barry Switzer did get a Super Bowl. He did lose an NFC Championship game to the 49ers, and the 49ers ended up winning the Super Bowl that year against the San Diego Chargers. They blow them out. Steve Young gets his one and only ring. He kind of got over the hump against Cowboys. He had lost 2 previous years in a row in the NFC Championship games. So we all know in the 90s, the 49ers and Cowboys were a huge NFC Championship rivalry, for 3 or 4 years in a row. So, but Steve Young, Jerry Rice, they get another ring. Jerry Rice got multiple rings, but that was his first one and only one with Steve Young and not with Joe Montana. But Barry Switzer gets into the Super Bowl his second year though. That's Cowboys' third ring in the 90s. Since the 95-96 season, Cowboys have not won a Super Bowl. We're pushing 30 years here, folks. I know Cowboys fans don't like hearing it, but that's the truth. But here's the thing I want to bring up about Troy Aikman. This is well documented. His attitude towards Barry Switzer, in my opinion, I like Troy Aikman. We are all far from perfect. Hindsight's 2020, so let me make that clear. But in my opinion, I still like Troy Aikman overall because he's a Cowboys quarterback, and I think we all make mistakes, and I don't want to be blamed for something for the rest of my life. But Troy Aikman's attitude towards Barry Switzer, in my opinion, was wrong. it's one thing to have some disagreements with the coach, but but in my opinion, Troy Aikman was flat out trying to start creating a mutiny against Barry Switzer when he was there, and they still win a ring. That's how good the Cowboys were. They have all this drama with Jimmy Johnson, Jerry Jones. They still get their second ring. They have all this drama with Troy Aikman trying to get people to jump ship on Barry Switzer, and they still get their third ring with him. That's how crazy. That's how crazy this was, man. That's why this show was so interesting, and it's just crazy, people. But I think Troy Aikman is really, really wrong for how he handled that whole entire situation. I know what broke the camel's back was, I guess, Barry Switzer heard him say something to one of the black players, I think a black wide receiver or a black running back on the Cowboys team. And I don't know what he said, but Barry Switzer went up to him, I guess, after the game, called him into his office like the next day and said, hey, you need to apologize to that guy. And Troutman's like saying, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't say what he thinks I said. And all the Cowboys players backed Troutman up. I mean, they said, no, since Troutman's been here, he's never said anything prejudiced. Like 80% of the NFL is black, and we've never heard him say anything like that. Like 75-8% of the NFL is black, right? So they're like, no. In my time here, Troutman's been here for like 4 or 5 years. Like he's never said anything like that during my time here. But he said something. I guess Barry Switzer didn't like it, and he's like, "Hey, man, you got to apologize because that was uncalled for." But Troutman's like, "Nope." So I personally like Barry Switzer. Out of the two coaches, I do think Jimmy Johnson's better, but I have nothing against Barry Switzer. He got them a ring, man. We have to give Barry Switzer a lot of credit, and that's one thing I'll say about Michael Irvin before this whole drug problem. There was one really good thing I liked that Michael Irvin said up on the stage when the Cowboys were getting presented with the trophy. You know, uh, Michael Irvin gave Coach Barry Switzer his flowers, saying, "Hey, man, Barry Switzer deserves a lot of credit because he had a lot of pressure taking over for a great coach like Jimmy Johnson, winning back-to-back rings, and for him to get us our third ring, like that's pretty good. Like not a lot of coaches would be able to do that. Like that's a lot of pressure on you, and he was able to do that. So I thought very highly of Michael Irvin when he said that. Unfortunately, the next season, Michael Irvin has all of his drama with the drugs. He's getting busted for cocaine with hookers. One of the hookers was testifying against him. I totally forgot there was a hit on Michael Irvin's life because I guess this hooker that Michael Irvin was messing around with, she was married to some cop from the Dallas police force, and he has a hit on him. I totally forgot about that. I knew about the cocaine stuff because that went on for a while. Especially his last couple of years in the NFL. You know, but man, that was crazy. Um, even though Michael Irvin made a lot of mistakes, some people probably thinks he should be in jail. Um, maybe he should, maybe he shouldn't. But at the end of the day, they were able to get a flea bargain. Prosecution was actually pretty surprised he was able to get a deal because they had a lot of evidence against him, especially that hooker testifying against him. Like she just pretty much told them that, yeah, she had him nailed. She had him nailed, man. Saying it was his cocaine because that was a big question. Was it Michael Irvin's cocaine or was it someone else's? She said it was his cocaine. That was going to get him possibly like 20 years in jail. But he made a deal and he was playing football the following season. But that was pretty much the end. You can say it was the beginning of the end for the Dallas Cowboys after that point. They did make it into the playoffs next year, but they get eliminated pretty early, like in the first or second round. And then after that stretch, they didn't make the playoffs for like several years. Michael Irvin retired because he has a scary, neck injury, head injury. Troy Aikman had multiple concussions, like 8 or 9 in his career. He retires like 2 or 3 years later in 2000, right after Michael Irvin. But Emmitt Smith, like I said at the beginning of this, Emmitt Smith was the guy that caused no drama. He's there with the Cowboys the longest until 2002. Then he goes to the Cardinals for a couple seasons, but he signs one day with the Cowboys back in 2005, and he retires as a Cowboy. He had a 1 day contract to retire as a Cowboy because that's how much the Dallas Cowboys meant to Emmitt Smith. But like I said, of all three, I would say Emmitt Smith by far is easily by far the biggest class act of all three of them: Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin, Emmitt Smith. From watching this Netflix series. Before I close, we'll talk about the Micah Parsons trade. What do you guys think? A lot of people were blaming Jerry Jones because it's typical Jerry Jones to not basically to he likes to sit on signing players. It happened last year, CeeDee Lamb. It's happened previous years before that, but he did eventually sign CeeDee Lamb. But CeeDee Lamb did miss all of training camp, last year, which kind of affected the Cowboys a little bit last year, obviously, with not having reps with Dak Prescott. That's pretty easy to say. We all thought Micah Parsons would get signed eventually, but he goes to the Green Bay Packers. A lot of people are blaming Jerry Jones, but the more I looked into this, actually, I am not a big, huge fan of Jerry Jones, but after looking into this and really diving into it, obviously, I don't think it's actually Jerry Jones's fault. I think Micah Parsons wanted way too much money. Yes, he is a very good player in the NFL, but he's not the top. He's not better than T.J. Watt. He's not better than Myles Garrett. He's not better than a couple other guys. Yeah, he's probably in the top 5, definitely top 10, but probably top 5. But he wanted way too much money. He wanted over $40 million. He wanted to be the highest paid non-quarterback player, and he wanted more than Myles Garrett, Justin Jefferson, his little teammate, I think, CeeDee Lamb. He wanted more than T.J. Watt, who signed a big contract. But here's the thing: T.J. Watt, T.J. Watt, Myles Garrett, other defensive players are really dominant in their position. They have more. Yes. Parsons was dominant in his first 4 years. He had over 10 sacks each season, like I think 52 or 53 sacks in 4 years. He's averaging like 13 sacks a year, basically. So yes, his stats are there to a certain extent. That's very, very good. But Myles Garrett has been playing longer. T.J. Watt has been playing longer. And as great as Micah Parsons is at rushing, he is not as well rounded as these other guys are. T.J. Watt and Myles Garrett are much more well rounded than Micah Parsons is, because Micah Parsons pretty much flat out sucks on run defense. He is not very good. Myles Garrett is well rounded. T.J. Watt well rounded, like a forced fumbling machine. Like, they're just wreckers. I mean, T.J. Watt is a freaking wrecker. A lot of people are saying that Micah Parsons has slowed down from his first couple of years. He was a wrecker his first year because they didn't know how to deal with the speed. But now they're kind of like, but now the leagues are kind of figuring him out a little bit, because Micah Parsons could have some games where he is completely silent. Granted, that could happen to anybody, even Myles Garrett and T.J. Watt and other players. It could happen when they're keen on you all game long, but he has done it, I'll say, a little bit more than what should happen. Like, he can be non-existent at times. And one thing that was going against Micah Parsons is he has not played well in all 3 playoff appearances that he's had for the Cowboys. He has been basically non-existent in all 3 playoff games with the Cowboys. So yes, I'm sad to see Micah Parsons go, but in a weird way, this might be a blessing in disguise. I think Micah Parsons and his agent are crazy to be wanting over $40 million. I think Jerry Jones had a pretty good offer. I think the final offer was like around 40 or 41, if I'm not correct. But honestly, I think that's too high. It probably should have been the 30 million range, 35 million range somewhere, I think. Because he's good. He's very good, but he's not the top dog. Asking for number 1 money when you're not the number 1 player, that's kind of crazy. Like, I think Micah Parsons and his agent are out of their freaking mind. And like I said, early on, it's very easy to blame Jerry Jones because he has a bad history of this, and Jerry Jones is to blame for a lot of things. But in this case, I mean, you can't just blame Jerry Jones for everything just because you don't like Jerry Jones. You have to be objective. You got to look at things, clearly. with all the facts on the table and make a level-head decision. Basically, be an adult, like no knee-jerk reactions. Don't be making decisions based on how well you like the guy, or dislike the guy, kind of deal. I think Jerry Jones actually did the right thing. He stood his ground, and we got some pretty good players. We got a pretty good deal out of it in a way, and we have a pretty good run stopper with the Green Bay Packers. Can't think of his name right now. It's on the tip of my tongue, but he's been really good at stopping the run with Green Bay. And our run defense for the Cowboys has been horrible for the past decade. So he could, be a big this run stopper from Green Bay. I know his name. I tip my tongue. All fans, help me out here. I know you guys know about this trade, but he could help out the Cowboys and these other picks that we got coming up. So could help out, man. Um, I don't think the Cowboys are going to be very good this year anyway. A lot of questions around the new head coach. He's kind of a suspicious hire. Um, you know, we'll see. It could be 2 years in a row the Cowboys don't make the playoffs. The Cowboys did make the playoffs 3 years in a row previous to this, and they had the deja vu. They finished 12-5 3 seasons in a row. Last year they finished 7-10, not making the playoffs. They might squeak in the playoffs at 9-8 or 10-7. I got the Cowboys finishing either 8-9, 9-8 at best, 10-7. They might be able to get in the playoffs at 10-7. Usually at 10-7, that's like you're like the last wild card spot. Maybe 9-8, depending on how well the other teams are playing. I've seen some teams squeaking at 9-8, but usually 10-7 is kind of like the mark for making a last spot. And there's been some 10-7 teams that didn't make the spot. I mean, the Seahawks were one team last year that they were 10-7, did not make the playoffs. So um, I don't know, but viewers, I want to know your thoughts on this. Um, was the Micah Parsons trade good? What do you think about the Netflix series, America's Team? What do you think about the Jerry Jones, Jimmy Johnson saga? I already told you my piece. I think you know Jerry Jones is more to blame, but for sure, Jimmy Johnson was not innocent. And that's one thing I'll say in closing is the cool thing is they did make up 30 years later, and Jimmy Johnson, it was long overdue. He finally gets inducted into the Cowboys Ring of Honor a couple years ago, and of course, Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin, Emmett Smith, Charles Haley, you know, I think Prime Time, was there also, Deion Sanders. But I know the other four guys for sure were. They're all there for this moment at the Cowboys halftime. And that was kind of cool to see, Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones make up after almost 30 years. Because, like I said, Jimmy Johnson should have been in this thing like 10 or 15 years ago. But Jerry Jones was holding out on him because of their relationship issues, for 30 years. And but they finally let things go. They kissed and made up, and they both. And one other cool thing is they both said they're both wrong, and they both said at the end of the show, Netflix show was like, yeah, we both should have been more considerate of the other person's feelings. They're both kind of like this thinking about their feelings only, and they weren't thinking about the other person's feelings, how they feel, how they look at things, like how they are feeling about this whole thing, like from their perspective. So that was one thing they learned. The one thing they had learned after being much older and wiser, and I think that's just something good to remember in our own lives. Like, hey, man, you know, I know they hit a moment, things may not be good, but just try to let things simmer down, cool down. Granted, it shouldn't take 30 years, but just kind of let cooler heads prevail. Kind of look at it through a different lens after you calm down. Usually, the first couple of days is not a good time to do it, but after a couple of days, and you're starting to cool off a little bit. Take a look at things from a new view, from a new lens, and kind of like try to see things differently, man, and not just from your opinion, but how others can see it, man. Because it's a team sport, it's a team thing, and you're not the only person involved in this. So a lot more people are involved with this. And obviously, it's hurt the Cowboys. They haven't won a Super Bowl since. I mean, they won one Super Bowl after that with Barry Switzer, but not in almost 30 years. So I'll close with that. Um, One last thing, like I said at the beginning of the show and opening, Monty and I will be doing a show this Friday. The Cowboys, Philadelphia Cowboys, and I mean, they didn't say Philadelphia Cowboys, the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. Really gonna mix my words here, man. But they are starting off the NFL season on Thursday. You know, here in 3 more days, they're kicking off the NFL season. Obviously, a huge rivalry. I can't stand the Philadelphia Eagles, but it should be a good game. It should be interesting in rivalry games like this. Hopefully, the Cowboys show up, but they are playing at Philadelphia Eagles. Hopefully, it's a good game. So stay tuned for Friday when me and Monty come back online. But peace out, and you guys have a good night. And I hope you guys had a good Liberty weekend. I will talk with you, you guys, on Friday. All right, good night.